Lots to report today and all the changes happening to Tesla's manufacturing, batteries, tariffs, and competitors like BYD. First, Tesla's now selling variants of both the Model Y and Model 3 in the US that do and don't qualify for the $7,500 EV credit. They're also using less expensive batteries for some of these cars. We'll let you know what to watch out for. Second, Tesla's 4680 battery cell production by its partner LG Energy is set to start in a couple of months. LG's South Korean factory will be producing enough 4680 batteries to supply up to 110,000 Tesla vehicles. Third, Canada is now considering to impose tariffs on China-made EVs. This follows a similar move by both the European Union and the US. But BYD is not standing still. They're making moves on a factory in Mexico. We'll share more information on that. I've got Hans Nelson joining us. He has a YouTube channel called Hans C. Nelson. Thanks, Hans.
Thanks for having me, Herbert.
So this is your specialty, batteries, factories, and so forth. Let's take a look at this news here. So Tesla's now manufacturing variants of the Model Y and Model 3 in the US that do and don't qualify for the $7,500 federal EV credit. So what's happening is that they're going to ask you, do you qualify for the credit? If you don't qualify for the credit, they're going to send you a variant of the car that uses less expensive batteries. And then if you do, then they'll give you the more expensive battery. And so that's a great way to really just, prioritize where the batteries go. So this is example, vehicles not eligible for federal tax credit. You can see these are the cars, and they've now figured out that these are the ones that's going to have a different battery. This is LG versus Panasonic batteries, right? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it is really positive on the one hand to just see Tesla continuing to improve the number of cell suppliers that they have and the access to batteries that they have through these different manufacturers at higher and higher levels. This is one of the things that, we saw Tesla's plans and their hopes for trying to just grow their battery supply and internally with the 4680, with the dry electrode processes, and they had really, really ambitious targets. And so Tesla was really trying to aggressively ramp up their own access to batteries through their internal efforts with the 4680, with the dry electrode process, and they had multiple terawatts a year ambitions and goals that they're aiming at for that internal production. But what we've seen over the past couple years since the supply crunch is that it's been a lot easier for Tesla to get the batteries that they need, that they're no longer cell constrained. And there are a lot of battery manufacturers that are willing to sell to them at prices that really work within inside of their cost structure. And so they haven't had to be as aggressive on those internal cell supply goals because they have what they need. And LG is one of the players that a lot of the other auto manufacturers were really leaning heavily on LG to provide batteries to them. And then we've seen a lot of those manufacturers then step back from their EV manufacturing plans. And that's created some excess capacity for LG that they need to then go and find a customer for. And so it's been a good fit for Tesla and for LG to work together. And it takes some of the pressure off of Elon, off of Tesla, off of the 4680 manufacturing team, which is not to say that Tesla isn't going to continue to develop that product. It really was ambitious and it's very hard. And we've got some commentary a little bit later here in the episode that we'll talk about some of the challenges for that. But I think this is overall a good thing for Tesla because it's good for their cost structure. And then as far as for customers, I think it is very smart on Tesla's part to provide the batteries that are manufactured here in the United States that qualify for the EV tax credit, to allocate those to customers who also qualify for the EV tax credit, and then to give LG batteries potentially to customers who don't qualify. That's just obviously smart, makes sense kind of all the way around. And I think it's good also for customers to have visibility into that and to make their purchasing decisions from a place of being well informed.
So I heard somebody, I don't know if this is real or not, what they said was that if you don't qualify for the $7,500 EV credit. I think that if you're, jointly making over $300,000 per year or something like that you're going to get the LG battery, which is not as good. So what he was saying was that even the long range version of, let's say, the Model 3 with the LG battery, it's worse than the Panasonic battery for the regular range. So you want to tell Tesla that you do qualify for something like that. Do you think that that's true?
I would really need more information. I haven't seen that specifically. I do know that, LG was one of the main battery suppliers for lots of these other companies, for Chevy. So any battery issues that the Bolt has had, for instance, I think most of those kind of do tie back to LG, and there have been some quality issues. But the thing for our customers to remember is that those were with pouch cells; those were not
Mm,
necessarily with cylindrical cells, and I don't know that those quality issues will carry over to LG
yeah.
batteries that are made for Tesla, that are going to be made in either the 2170 or the 4680 form factor. Unless those, I don't know if there is pouch cells that are going into these Teslas. I don't think that that's the case. I believe that they're all 2170s.
Hmm.
And if that is the case, I don't know that I would be concerned about getting an LG battery up front, but it would definitely be something that, if I was making that purchase decision, I would be doing some research into that
Yeah.
and trying to understand if that's something that I should be concerned about. And I'd be looking for good, high quality sources of data. I think, obviously, the person that I would most like to hear weigh in on this is Jordan Giesecke from The Limiting Factor, and get his opinion on that. But I would be surprised if Tesla was
Right.
going
It
to
wouldn't
work
is. Yeah.
with a company like LG and not require LG to meet very high levels of quality on the battery packs that they're providing to
Yep.
customers. And I, LG, could be on, if the products that LG are supplying to Tesla do end up having defects, I think it'll be on LG to make sure that they handle any warranty claims that arise from those, and that customers are taken care of. And I think Tesla's got a pretty good track
Yep.
record of making those types of things correct and right, and solving those issues for customers.
Very good point. Well, let's report again on the next story here, which is LG has started production of the Tesla's 4680s, and they're gonna start in August, which is a couple months from now. So Jordan replied to that. Jordan Giesecke is one of the best accounts to follow if you're not yet doing that. It's called The Limiting Factor. He has both a YouTube channel and an X account. He is de facto one of the most experts, the best experts on batteries, and he follows Tesla closely. So he said this: LG starting mass production of their version of the 4680 in August. It's going to be in the factory in South Korea. The capacity of the plant is 9 gigawatt hours, which is, I believe, equal to 110,000 Tesla vehicles per year. They're also constructing a plant in Arizona with a capacity of 36 gigawatt hours dedicated to 4680s, which is expected to be operational in 2026. So big partner with Tesla building 4680s. Note, the Arizona plant was originally expected to produce 27 gigawatt hours of 2170s, but the plans changed a couple of years ago to 4680s and higher production volume. So it sounds like that they found a model of the 4680 that they're willing to double down on. The plant will also be producing LFP pouch cells for a total of 53 gigawatt hours.
And that
Yeah,
piece of information right there is
yeah,
actually very important, I think, strategically for Tesla and for the American battery supply chain in general. So, 53 minus 36 is what, 17, I believe, gigawatt hours worth of LFP pouch cells. And those LFP cells, to be able to, LFP is obviously the cheapest battery chemistry right now that is capable of, being a high quality automotive application. And to be able to produce those here in the United States, where they qualify for the federal EV tax credit, you take the cheapest battery and then you layer in the EV tax credits on top of that. And that is a very positive unit economics piece of
mhm,
information to have. And a lot of I would expect that over the long term, the robotaxi platform that Tesla produces is most likely going to use LFP cells. And so to see LFP cells being developed and manufactured here in the United States is a good thing from a supply chain resilience standpoint. It's a good thing from unit economic standpoint. Like, it's just good all around.
Perfect. Okay, let's report some more. This is from Teslarati. So Tesla announced on June 8th that it cumulatively produced 50 million 4680 batteries in Texas, which is production of about 120,000 cells a day. The yield is still below 20%. Tesla will definitely rely on LG and Panasonic for batteries. LG is expected to expand its 4680 production operations to North America at its new Arizona plant that we just talked about. Initially expected to produce 2170s. Now they're going to make it 4680s, as we said. So this is what Jordan said, right?
Before we go on from there, just one quick note where they say the yield is still below 20%.
Right.
That has to be a mistake in the wording. I'm thinking potentially what they mean is that the scrap rate is still somewhere in the neighborhood of 20%. If only 20% of
Right.
the cells, that's 1 out of every 5 cells that came through there, was a good cell, then Jordan pointed this out, they would be shipping tons and tons of scrap out of the thing. And, Joe Tegmeyer would see that, like we would know as a community if that was the case. There's no way that they can be close to meeting their cost goals for this year that were talked about on the last earnings call, that, by the end of this year, they're hoping to be at cost parity with cell suppliers on the 4680, and they're already below the costs that cell suppliers were giving to them a couple years ago when prices were spiked. Like, there's no way we could be meeting those cost goals if 80% of all the cells that were made were being scrapped, which is what that statement implies. And that's just, I think that's
you're right.
They worded that poorly, and they used yield instead of scrap rate or something to that effect when they wrote that.
Yeah, I saw a lot of discussion around that specific comment, just like you're saying. All right, so this is what Jordan said about what's happening. He's going to compare LG's 4680 ramp to Tesla's. It's taking LG, an experienced cell manufacturer, 4 years to begin the production ramp of their version of 4680. That factory in South Korea likely won't get near its 9 gigawatt hour per year nameplate capacity until late next year or early 2026. This is all LG's experienced battery manufacturer. Their 36 gigawatt hour per year plant in Arizona doesn't start until 2026, which means it won't get near its nameplate production capacity until 2027 or 28. Those plants are likely using a wet coating process for the electrodes, so they're mainly using off-the-shelf technology. And that's what
an off-the-shelf technology
LG
should be faster to ramp up than what Tesla's trying to do with these dry battery electrodes.
Yeah.
And so, if it's still taking them a long time and they're using known equipment, known processes, then it does shine some light on how aggressive Tesla's own ambitions and goals have been and how well they are executing in light of how difficult of a problem this is.
For an experienced battery cell manufacturer. So then he says, if Tesla is currently at around 6 to 8 gigawatt hour per year run rate for its 4680 at Austin, that puts them about a year ahead of LG. That's despite never manufacturing cells before and trying to solve the dry coating process, which appear to be the biggest challenge with their manufacturing ramp. That is, although Tesla has widely missed their own scaling goals from Battery Day, when compared to the best cell manufacturers in the world, they're progressing well. Yes, Tesla did get a head start, and they've been importing the cathode rolls, but again, their difficulty level was set on max, whereas LG was set on moderate. Yeah, so that's what you just said, right?
Absolutely. And it is good to step back and remember that while, some people are rightly disappointed in the fact that we haven't ramped 4680 production as well as we had hoped, that what we are seeing is still excellent execution. And I just personally put this back and frame it and remember the fact that part of how Elon gets so much execution out of the team is that he sets these wildly ambitious goals that are really impossible. And when he says, our specialty, and I think at this point he was talking about SpaceX, but this is just generally true of Elon and his endeavors, is they take the impossible and they turn it into merely late. Like you set an impossible goal and you put it on an impossible time frame. In by doing that, trying to do something that is so hard and so impossible, it forces you to think outside of the box and try things that you would only ever try if you were trying to do something that was that crazy. Then a bunch of those things work. Now, some of them don't work, and it is hard, and you have to solve that problem um, in iterative steps, and it does take you longer than you expect. But at the end of it, you accomplish 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times as much as you would have accomplished if you set a goal that was definitely a possible accomplishment to achieve and in a reasonable time frame. Like, so this is part of the way that it just feels and looks, and like this is the cycle of investing in Elon and his companies and the technology that his people are developing and working on. um you know, look at SpaceX. He wanted to have people on Mars in like 2028, and now it's like, okay, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. I think it's going to, push out to into the mid 2030s. But having people set foot on Mars, like no one was talking about doing that in any realistic form or fashion 10 years ago, and except for Elon and except for SpaceX. And so the fact that it very well could happen with, like, we may have the first people set foot on Mars sometime in the next decade. That is something that would have been viewed as impossible, and now it's just turned into merely late. The 4680s, like, this is an impossible problem to solve, to move away from this wet electrode process to these dry coated electrodes. And we are accomplishing it, and we're making good progress, and we're actually progressing faster than people who normally do this for a living. And it's because we are trying to do something that's so hard and be so aggressive with it. And there is some disappointment when you don't meet your wildly ambitious goals, but you still achieve the impossible.
Thanks. Beautiful way to frame that. That's exactly correct. I mean, Tesla's just, for us who follow it closely, we are pretty impressed and amazed at how fast and how great they are. So what we were just talking about, right, is how Tesla is preparing themselves to be able to create the batteries that are in the country to be able to take advantage of the $7,500 credit. That's why they do the variants. That's why they have these partnerships with not just LG, but Panasonic and many others. And they're creating their own batteries to be able to really do mass production. This next set of stories is about competitors and trying to prevent the Chinese electric vehicle companies not only coming to the US, but now looks like that Canada is also now the most recent country to consider tariffs on China-made EVs. Canada is now mulling the possibility of placing tariffs on China-made electric vehicles, becoming the most recent country, right? Because we just reported a couple of weeks ago that the European Union imposed a 38% tax that's going to start on July 1st. And the United States, obviously, they've also announced that they're going to be doing taxes and tariffs onto China EV markets that's imported into here. Now you got Canada doing it as well. So this is the Deputy Prime Minister who said on Monday that it would consider tariffs on China-made EVs. And she called the country's state-directed policy of overcapacity a factor of unfair competition. Chinese producers are quite intentionally generating a global oversupply that undermines EV producers around the world, including here in Canada. So, Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, said the country should consider the option of immediately matching or exceeding U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports. They should definitely just match the U.S., including at least 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. Taking every advantage of low labor standards and dirty energy, China is flooding the market with artificially cheap electric vehicles. Unless we act fast, we risk Ontario and Canadian jobs. So the EU is considering duties of up to 38% on Chinese EVs, in addition to the 10% import tax that already applies to vehicles. This is the story about EU announcing that they were going to do this, and now China came back yesterday, and said that they want EU to stop. They don't want them to do it. So they're having discussions. Beijing wants the EU to scrap the plans to impose the tariffs. Actually, it's July 4th, not 1st, which is very soon. So they're negotiating. They're trying to say, hey, don't do it. That's about it. So yeah, before we move on to the final story, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that obviously all of these things are going to be hotly contested points, and there's going to be negotiations back and forth between China and all of these groups, whether it's China and the United States, whether that's with China and the EU, whether that's with China and Canada. And I think these are definitely discussions that need to be had. And everyone involved is going to pull out all of the leverage that they have personally and individually in those situations and negotiations to try and make the best deal for themselves and for their country. And I think that that is necessary and an important part of the process of figuring out how we bring EVs, to the mass market. I do think that China is going to continue to be a leader in that space behind Tesla because they take this more seriously than anyone else. And the reason that they have this excess capacity, as one of the Canadian officials said, is because they have made this a national priority, and it's going to continue to be a national priority. And that is something that other countries and industries need to take into account, that we can't avoid this competition with China, that there are different ways that we can try and deal with it. But this is kind of an inevitable part of the march of technology, that we're just going to be moving away from ICE vehicles and towards electric vehicles for almost all forms of transport over time. And that is an inescapable reality that is driven purely by the economics of EVs versus the economics of ICE vehicles. That, over time, EVs continue to get cheaper and cheaper. Batteries continue to improve, both in amount of energy that they can store, the amount of energy that they can discharge in a period of time, and then the cost of producing that. And that is like saying that, gas engines are going to get cheaper by 10% every year. Well, if gas engines could get cheaper at the same rate that electric batteries could get cheaper, then there would actually be a long-term competition between those technologies. But since gas engines not only are not getting cheaper, they're getting more expensive because we continue to put more and more emissions control standards on them that make the technology more complicated to manufacture. They're getting more expensive. And that we just can't escape the fact that batteries are going to continue to get cheaper, electric motors are going to continue to get cheaper, and internal combustion engines are going to get more expensive, which means that over time, everything becomes EV. You just can't get away from that reality. And so I hope that as all of these different individuals, countries, companies, industries, like every party that's involved in this, as they're trying to make these decisions, that they keep that factor in mind, that we need to get on board with transitioning as quickly as possible, because this is where the future is going. So you can either lead into where the future is going, or you can follow. And personally, I think it's better for people to lead. Um, and right now, that's the stance that China has taken, and most of the rest of the world has not. And I think that in that aspect, that China is going to be vindicated over time in prioritizing the correct technology.
Yeah. I think in a very simplistic way that I'm thinking about this is that import duties, tariffs are fine. You should do them. What you should do is force the companies to build factories in your country. So Tesla building a factory in China. That's how they provide the vehicles in China. They're Tesla at Giga Shanghai. They've got a factory in Europe. That's how they're doing it. And so, you've got BYD trying to create a factory in Hungary and to be able to build it in Europe. So even if Europe then creates a tariff for Chinese imports, BYD will be able to sell and create there. So this is why BYD, I wanted to report on this, is actually planning, and they've kind of started making moves on their plant in Mexico. So this is one way that BYD would surpass or go around the Canada or the US tariffs if they do this. So this is Stella Lee. She is the CEO of BYD in America, represents America, BYD. And they had They expect to have chosen a site to build a plant in Mexico by the end of 2024. And that plant will be able to put out up to 150,000 cars a year. It's going to be built in central Mexico, and it's going to take 2 to 3 years to open up. So by the end of this year, they'll pick the place, and then by 2 to 3 years, they'll have it ready. And so again, that's the way to do this, right? Just go ahead and start building these factories, and that'll be great for the jobs. In this case, it kind of going around it because it's Mexico, but still it's part of the North American trade agreement. So I think that's the way to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Then that's, we've seen this scenario play out before. We had the Japanese invasion, as they called it, when Japanese automakers, started exporting vehicles all around the world, including here to North America. And there wasn't really anything that U.S. protectionism at that point in time could do to keep these automakers from coming and competing head to head against American companies. And it radically transformed the auto market here in the United States. And honestly, for the better, that customers got better cars for better prices, which was a positive for the economy as a whole, other than for these North American auto manufacturers. And I think that is basically the general trend that we will also see again here with EVs coming out of China, is that they will build factories wherever they need to build factories. They will partner with local jurisdictions to satisfy concerns about jobs by creating jobs themselves. But ultimately we will see Chinese made, or, Chinese owned companies that are supplying exceptionally high quality products that meet consumer demand. And that it's one of the main forces, in addition to Tesla, that's going to force these companies that are just stuck trying to sell ICE vehicles into bankruptcy over time. And that's not going to be a comfortable process, but disruption rarely ever is. And that is, it's just a story that we've seen play out time and time again. And we get a front row seat to this version of it this time.
Yep. Competition's good. So Tesla's prepared well. They've got the battery partnerships. They're now finally qualifying for the $7,500 EV credit for the Model 3. That was an issue for a while because they're now, made in the US. Again, if you create your factories and batteries in the US, you're going to benefit. But the competition's good, like you're saying. So thank you so much.
One additional point to make also with, BYD bringing a factory to Mexico specifically, that will be a positive force for just developing the quality of the supply chain for automotive there in Mexico. Obviously, it's already there. It's already robust. But, increasing investment into that area will also be something that benefits Tesla if they get their Mexico factory up and running as well. And so on one hand, there's competition, but on the other hand, the growth and the broadening of the industry in that area is kind of a rising tide that lifts all boats as well.
Yeah, that's what Elon says, right? It's okay. Competition is great. We just need to stay ahead. Innovation engine, we're always ahead. No problem. Thank you so much, Hans. Follow him on his YouTube account, Hans C. Nelson. Thanks, everybody. Bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.